a couple little notes from that I come up across. Now, we had talked about this movement. Everybody can hear me good?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. We had talked about this movement had already been pre-bushed, but there was some binding going on. So my conclusion, what happened, this particular person decided to pick out bushings that just fit the pivots, and then he drilled them and put them in. A lot of them were loose because they were too thin for the plates, so they couldn't be riveted, or maybe that person didn't know about riveting, I don't know. Anyway, I had to ream out or broach out some of the holes. Is if you use that method and you don't broach them out, and in these cheap, like I consider these American movements a cheaply made movement because the plates are so thin. And if they're not perfectly lined up the pivot holes, you may have all kinds of play when you test it in the pivot hole on one plate. But when you put the two plates together, they're aligned by the threaded studs. There's 4 studs. Actually, this one has 5 studs. So that aligns the plates, but they may not be perfectly lined up from the top plate to the bottom plate, and you get binding. So you have to check them for free play when you put the plates together. So I suspect that's what that person did. I replaced one bushing that, and a couple other ones fell out when I was trying to broach them. So you have to check them both ends, and then you have to also check it for free play. And I like to, when I put it in, I like to see just a touch of movement in it. That way I know it's free. And when you lift it up, you can let it fall down, which we're going to go through. But I just wanted to touch on that. Why? That's my opinion as to what happened. That person knew about bushing, but he didn't understand why he was bushing it, and he didn't understand the theory behind bushing it, because he didn't do any of the checks to verify that the bushing work he did was acceptable. Like, I'm not against ultrasonic cleaning. I've seen problems that other people have had after a period of time because people like to use ultrasonic cleaning. They use the water-based fluid, but they don't properly dry the movement. They think wiping it off with paper towel or using a hair dryer on it for a couple of minutes dries it, but it doesn't. That's what I'm against. It's a very expensive. You can spend, you know, for a larger size ultrasonic, you can spend $2,000, $3,000. And I personally believe there's other tools that you need more, you know, initially, instead of spending that kind of money up front to make a movement look shiny. Because if brass is shiny or whether it's stained, it doesn't make any difference. As long as any two surfaces that the metals touch is clean and highly polished, that's what makes the clock work. Whether the movement is shiny, that just makes you feel good. It has nothing to do with how long the clock is going to last or how long it's going to work.
Yeah, I have a question. That you were saying that you about cleaning with the ultrasonic and the plates. You said that's not, you know, I agree with you that the importance for a movement to work is only the working surfaces to be nice, smooth, and clean. But you know, if you selling from the selling purpose to returning to the vendor, if they don't see it nice and shiny movement, then they say that you have done nothing. You haven't done anything to it. See, this is kind of, it is.
Do you know what I tell those people?
No.
I tell them I guarantee my work for at least a year, and depending what it is, it could go several years. So, you know, like I stand behind it, what I do, and a lot of times, like, you can take pictures and show people what it is. So if they want it shiny, I guess they can go some other place. It's the same thing if somebody brings the clock to me and wants the old wind-up movement taken out and a quartz one put in, I just tell them to go some other place because I don't do that. Any more questions?
No questions for me. Thank you.
It's too bad, I guess, Ben, that people feel that way, that they want to see it nice and shiny.
I'm telling you, I have done a few of those jobs, and if they don't see it shiny, but you know, particularly if you're doing a carriage clock or crystal regulator clock, you know, the people expect to see it because when you see the glass all around, you really want to see clean movement.
Yeah, some of those movements, it is a good idea to make them shiny, like you said, like a crystal regulator. Or,
yeah.
But
yeah.
like I personally haven't had anybody complain. But see, I don't advertise. People get my name from I don't know where, and people seem happy with what I do. So I haven't had anybody complain. It just like I've done a lot of wooden antique stuff, and I think antiques should look their age. There's no advantage of trying to make it look new. You might as well have a new one.
That's right. Yes.
And to me, the patina in the brass is part of it's the aging process.
I agree with you. I agree 100% with you. I do not clean if something is quality. I would not clean to the brilliant shiny for myself. But if somebody else wants me to do it, I will do it. But I always tell them that, you know, it in my view, it loses the value because patina is the witness of originality also.
You have to be careful in some of the more modern, especially the grandfather clocks. If you put them in an ultrasonic cleaner with ammonia and some of those chemicals, a lot of these parts have already been lacquered, and you start to cook that lacquer off, then you got a real mess.
Lacquer will come off with ultrasonic for sure.
Yeah, but then all you did was make it so it's going to tarnish much quicker.
Yes. So you get it back.
Anyway,
you get more money. You make more money.
Yeah. Okay, so what I think we will do, okay, this is the movement. I've got it sitting on my legs. I always use the long ones. I don't know why. I just use them. So what I'm going to do is we'll put each powertrain in. So I'll just set in the, and I usually start, now I didn't hook the spring up because we're going to pull it right back out. So I'll set in the neck, and I'm not oiling it because at this point, because we're going to take it back out. So I'm just setting in all the wheels. And the last one is the escape wheel. Now I have my little code, if you remember. There's I have one mark on the top of each one. So you can see the marks. And that tells me that that's the left-hand side, because I always code from the left to the right. And then I put a mark just with a Sharpie. It wipes off easy, but I never seem to take them off. It's my little, and I can tell if a movement comes back to me that I worked on it because I see those little Sharpie marks. So I've got them all in line, and I have my tray, this tray that I keep everything, you know, they're all in line. So it just, I can quickly put them together. So what I'm going to do is just quickly, I won't show you how, I'll just do this quickly because we're just going to talk about how it fits. So you got to put on my headpiece. So putting them together, it's kind of a process. I always work from the spring side. Sometimes they go together easy, sometimes they don't. When you're trying to hurry, that's when they don't. Okay, so I've got them all stuck in. So the next thing I'm going to do is you can't check the spacing, you can't check anything unless you stick the nuts on. Trying to squeeze it and hold it, because these plates bend so easy. So I'll just stick the 4 nuts on quickly. They only have to be finger tight. What we're doing now is we're just talking about the theory behind each powertrain. We're not really trying to assemble it for final. Okay, so I've got it. So I'm going to give you a side shot. I need about 4 cameras is what I need set up. Okay. I don't know. Is that enough light? Can you see the gears?
Perfect.
I'm going to click on mine. Yeah. So that I can see what you're seeing on my laptop. Okay. So what I want to do is I'm going to check. Okay. I've got plate. You can see that moving. And then the next wheel, you can see I've got play. So all the wheels have play, and that's an important step. These movements need a fair amount of end play. You don't want any binding. Now, the other thing you can do is you can put a straight edge across, and you can see that there's some air because people have bent these over the years and for various reasons, but now I've got all good end play, so that's important. So the next thing I'm going to do is the other thing that you might want to do when you're assessing it to put it back together is I actually put an arrow which way the wheels should turn. You'll see my arrow. You'll see my arrow on here. So when I'm demonstrating it, so I'm supplying the power and it moves very easily. And you can see the escape wheel, it coasts and there's nothing seems to be binding. And I'll check the top, each pivot. I'll make sure that I can feel the, it may only be a couple thou play in that, but nothing's binding. And the other test you can do when you're putting it together is you lift it up, and if they drop very freely. See, I'm lifting it up and they're dropping very freely. So I know the time side now is nice and loose, free, and it's doing all this without any oil, which is good. The other thing to keep in mind about the time side is absolutely no indexing. I'm going to get rid of this cable. There's absolutely no indexing when you put the time side together. The wheels can go any place. So you don't have to worry about matching up certain pieces to get it to run. So now we have the time side done. So here's where, this is the side that separates the men from the boys, as they say. Because here's where you can get into all your troubles if you don't understand exactly what's going on. So to deal with this, this the minute arbor. Now, these bottom wheels, this is your hour tube with the hour wheel. And this is a funny gear that they use. I don't know why, but now this lobe, now you notice this particular movement only has one lobe, but it has a half-hour strike and it has the hour strike, and you wonder how it does it with the one lobe, because a lot of movements will actually put two lobes on it 180 degrees apart, but this only has one, and I'll show you how they get around that. It's kind of a simple way that they do it. So we need this in the movement. They're pretty well straightforward. It's a big hole, and for what we're going to do, this is your 12-to-1 hour minute to hour ratio gear. We don't need that to figure out how the striking mechanism works, so we won't put that in. The only reason I had to put in this timepiece, because I need that lobe, because that's what triggers everything. The next thing we need is the count wheel. If you notice, it goes from 1 right around to 12, and again, so this fits. I don't oil these because I don't want them to be slack. I don't want them to move hard, but I also don't want them to move too easy. So that just sets on there, and then there's a clip, and it has a little point on it that fits into this hole. So they just slide in. Yeah. So you know, that moves fairly easy. If you add any place you add oil, you're also creating a potential area for grime and dirt and for the oil to harden. So it's not necessary there. So the next thing is the, now you notice on the second wheel, there's a gear, a pinion, and that's what drives this count wheel. So far, it's not critical how we put anything. The first couple gears aren't critical. Now this is the one that does the magic. This wheel. So you can see it's got a pinion, so it's driven by number 2. This is the number 3 wheel, and it has a cam on the bottom, and you notice there's 2 points 180 degrees apart. Those are the points that hit a lever that does the striking. So when the lever, when that spins, it goes around and it trips. So they have 2. Some movements have multiple ones, and that controls the speed that it strikes at. Now you'll also notice this notch. There's one on each side. That's very important, and we're going to talk about what it does. So let's put it into movement. So that's number 3. And number 4 is the other important one. You notice it has a little pin, and always check those pins to make sure they're nice and smooth, because that has to slide along. So that sits in. Okay, so that's all we need. So the other 2 points that we need, this other lever, and be very careful because if you test it and it works before you take it apart, be careful you don't bend any of these, because they're a bit of a challenge. Now this piece here will wear. Make sure there's no burrs on the end of it. This one actually had some burrs I had to file off. You can see the shiny there when I file, so it's nice and smooth, because its job is to fit into the deep hole, because when it fits into the shallow hole, it won't let the number 3 wheel do anything. But when it fits into the deep one, it falls down, and we're going to talk about that in great length. And this is the other arm. This is the arming piece. When this piece hooks onto that pin I told you in number 4, when you arm it, that pin lifts up off the wheel. So that pin lifts up off the wheel, and it goes around and hits side onto this. And you have to make sure this is smooth. So now it's armed, so it's set this way so that the weight, it will drop off really quick. And that's what happens when the maybe a minute or two before the strike happens, you'll hear a noise, and that's what's happening. The wheel is dropping off this point, hook, it's raising up. And if you have any, that's got to be nice and smooth so that it raises up easy. Because it's sitting, if I was a monkey, I'd have enough hands to do this. So you can see it's sitting like that, so it slides down. It slides down real easy. There's no catching. And then once that wheel turns, it will go down and it will hit, it will sit on this. So when it hits the time, it will go down and fall right off. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay, so the easiest way to put these in I usually lift this number 4 out, and we can set it aside. Okay, so how do you know where they go? Well, we know that this point here has to fit down in this wheel. So we find the spot. So it fits in the hole. And then we want to align, we'll rotate this one so that it fits. Now, you always have to bend this arm a little bit, guaranteed. But we'll do our best to get it close. Now, the other thing you notice that I'm playing with, I'll zoom in here best I can. Remember that notch I was telling you about? That other arm has to fit down in that. So when you're putting it together, so that arm fits down in that, and it also fits down into the deep hole. So you see it in the deep hole, and it fits down into the notch of number 3. So now we can set that other wheel in, because and make sure it goes underneath. So the other thing we want to do is we want to turn that wheel there, so it's locked. So that's how you set that up. So now we have this other one. So its job, this arm here has to push the other one. So we just slide it underneath. Because now you see the cam. Is an aerial view good for that, or you want a side view?
It's good from here.
Okay, so when this cam comes around, it pushes this wide paddle here and lifts that up. So what it's actually doing, I'm going to give you another view. I guess we'll do a bit of a side view. So you can see the interaction. Okay, so how that trips, so the cam is down at that wide piece, and you see the arm, that arm right in here, that's what pushes this outside one up. So they're kind of going through a couple levers. You see that move back and forth, and it will push that arm up. Can you see that? So you got to make sure they're kind of some of them, because when you're moving around, like they get moved around pretty easy. So everything has to be Okay, so we'll go through it again. So the minute this has to be, which hits the lobe, this arm has to be on top of the wheel. This arm has to hook into that pin. And this piece has to be in the deep hole. And it also has to be into the notch that we looked at down inside. So we got enough that we can put that together, and we'll give it a quick test. I always start putting it together from the bottom. Now, and I also put the nuts on it, but I don't put them tight. I put it just because I don't have enough hands. I don't want them to raise up. You never tighten the nuts down to put pressure to force anything. Oh, the other thing that I did that I just thought of, all these wheels, the ends of them, when they machine them, they all had a point on the end. And I took and filed that off because that's what digs into the plates when you're trying to slide them around. So you'll find it beneficial to check the ends of those pivots and file that sharp, because when they machined it, they just, when you cut it, the last little, maybe 0.5 millimeter will actually break off, and they didn't even clean them up when they made these movements. But if that sharp point is there, it's just kind of like a needle, and it will dig into the brass plates and make life very difficult when you're trying to slide. So we'll go back and I'll put I got to raise this up some. Okay, so they're not even tight. They're just there so that I don't. And again, I'm going to go through the same process. It's hard to do. So I always start when I'm putting the pivots in place. I always start from the wheel side. And then the next thing I'm going to do is, and I just use a pair of tweezers, is I'll put the minute arbor in. And I have a little bit of weight on the top with my hands. First time I ever did it with a camera in the way. You'll find that some pivots are just a little bit longer than the other ones, and that allows them to fit. Now, there's this other tool called a pivot pusher. You always end up having to use that to get okay, everything I got's out of place. You have to be careful that those arms and levers on the top of the right wheel, and I'm going to have to move the camera. I can't do it without seeing what I'm doing. So when you're doing this, you got to be careful you don't move any of the indexing points, because if you move any of them, it will make life more challenging. You can't really hurt the ones that are used for the chiming. Like, they're pretty tough. And most of them don't rotate, so if they're a little bit okay, so I've got it. So we'll stick I'll just finger tighten those nuts up. Okay, so you notice it turns and it doesn't want to stop. So I'll get this over to a deep hole. So it's in the deep hole. Okay, so what moved on me is this locking pin is not in the right place. So it's already moved past the point it needs to hook. So this hook up in here, so that's already moved past because it goes, yeah, the pin is going that way. So it's moved past when it gets into the deep hole, and also when that other piece, see, the other piece is down into the notch, but that pin is gone by. So what you have to do there is I'll take that nut off the top. And you can be really careful. So what I have to do is gently lift that up and then pull it away. That's why the fly is not in. So I'll rotate that pin back to where I want it and let it go. There, you see it locked. It doesn't work very good without the fly in it, but now you can see I'm down in the hole here and this hook is locked. And this is in the deep hole. So the next thing I want to do to get it to work, I always put the fly in last. I stick it in the bottom hole, and then if you put a little bit of pressure and you're really careful, you can slide that up and stick it in the hole there. Because without that fly, okay, so I'll trip it. Okay, so if you watch the big thing, it goes down. And when it's down, you see, when it's down in the bottom of that little hole, now we'll look to where it is. See, it won't let it go deep enough to go down into, with the fly in, it's hard to see, but it won't let it go deep enough to go down and catch. If we look at the pin, see, that wheel goes right by that hook, so it doesn't catch. So if we're going slow up, I'll just do it slowly. So it drops down and you can see everything is catching. Any questions on that alignment? So when you turn the minute arbor, what you're doing is you'll see, maybe you can see it sideways. You'll see that spade thing move. So you're actually lifting. Now this particular movement, there's no helper springs. They just use weight. That's why you can't test any of these movements laying on the side. They won't work. So it's just the weight that trips everything. So I'm going to show you now how the arming, how that works. So I'll get it over. Okay, so so the arming works, it pushes it up and it has to hold it up. So you'll see this pin come down. And it's hard to. Okay, let me, I got to go in with a tighter zoom. See that pin? You see that pin? It's catching on that arm that was bent, and as soon as it drops, set it away. When that lobe goes by, that's why you have to be careful when you're testing the clock and nothing seems to work. Always check to make sure that your minute arbor isn't caught partway on a lobe, because the strike won't work if that happens. So, okay, so now I let it trip off. And you'll see, can you see that there? The pin goes by because it's dropped. But if that was raised up high, see if that's raised up high, it hits that arbor and then it drops down and then it lets it when it gets armed. So now we're going to talk about, so I got to lift this off again. So we're going to talk about putting the strike hammers in. Now you do this all together when you're doing it for real, but I'm trying to explain how they work.
Wendell, you said that, sorry to interrupt, you said that there were no helper springs on those levers?
No.
Okay.
Okay, so now this arm, it has a long arm here that goes on those 2 points on the number 3 wheel. They're on the bottom, you can't see them. And it has this, I'll have to move that out of the way. It has this piece. So all this piece is a guide that controls the amount of travel it can have. And this has a spring so that it snaps back. Now, I usually don't hook the springs up when I put them together because I find that pulls the piece sideways. I have a little point that I just reach in and hook them. You'll find your own way how you want to do that. But so this fits down in the hole. And that's what the bigger hole is in the bottom. So that controls the amount of travel that has. But you see, I already did something. It's on top. Before I can put that in, I got to put it under that number 3 wheel without moving the wheel. And if you need to rotate one of those wheels, you need to slide it sideways from the other pinion so it doesn't move the other wheel off. Okay, now the other hammer, this is their creative way of getting another, this one goes inside. Now you notice what they did here. The minute arbor lobe is on this side when it hits it, but because this has a long arm on the other side, 108 degrees apart, it actually strikes that on the other side, and that's how they got away with doing two with the one lobe. It's kind of it's a really cheap way of. So let's corners. Yeah, it is. So when you put these together, you have to be really careful because this, the half-hour hammer has to come up through that hole. And the leg has to go under the hour one. So anyway, I got that kind of set. So again, I'll just stick the two nuts on the bottom so that I don't get into, it doesn't fall out on me. Again, I'll repeat it again. I'm not doing this to pry anything. I'm doing that strictly to. Now, these last two that I put in, you can loosen these nuts off after and pull them down if they don't stay in place when you're trying to do all the other gears. So I'm going to bend down now and put that all back like we did before. So we'll have to go back through now and check it. See, right now there's no tension on that. Now this has tension because I hooked up that one spring. So you can see the spring down here. So what I'm going to do is I'll just reach in through the side with my little hook. And pull it back against the arm. And there, it's hooked up. So now I have tension. And you can see in here the treble. So it only allows it to treble so far. So let's check, see how close we are to all this stuff working. I see one reason it's not going to work. That one arm is under the wheel. So I got to pry there. Now it's on top of the wheel. By knowing where they have to go, sometimes you can just use a little bit of finesse and you can put it where it has to go. Okay, so you can see it working now. So I'm going to go to one of the deep holes. Okay, now what you can do, now I see it and I'm off. If you look closely, that count wheel, you'll see the gear and there's a space underneath. So you can actually push that down. And if you need to turn it a tooth, you can. Okay, so I lined up everything. So nothing's in the right place. Everything moved on me, but that's no problem. So what I'm going to do is do like I did before, lift up the corner, and we'll just slide that, rotate that wheel, which is a common thing that you have to do. I don't know any way around it. Sometimes you get lucky, but these session ones are just a little bit of a pain. They can be more of a problem than other ones sometimes. So I know what has to be lined up. So that's what I'm doing. I'm going to go right back to my, well, these two fell out. I don't know if you can see that. I didn't like where my lobe was, so I have to pry this corner up and these plates, because I have to pry it up from the bottom because I want to pull the pinion one out and move it away so that I can rotate it a little bit. So now it's back in. Put my, what are you guys seeing? You're not seeing too much. Put my one in that has the hook on it. So now we're going to pull it apart again. It's, if you try to put it all together with all the pieces in there, you can't see. So that's why I did it without. So I'm just taking all the pieces out, putting them in my tray. So like, I'm a firm believer in knowledge is power. And the more knowledge you have, the more power you have over what you're doing. And that way you'll control it and it won't control you. Because I don't really want to just be a happy mistake if I get it together. Like I've heard people talk about, well, sometimes I get it and sometimes I don't. And there's really no reason for that. Just remember, it's a piece of mechanics. And if you follow all the rules and mechanics that the clock was designed for, they go together. There's no mystery. There's no black box theory that something happens that you don't have control over. Okay, I have two different oils I use. I use an 80-40, which is my heavier oil that I use for grandfather clocks. And then I have an 80-30, which is a lighter duty. And then for cuckoo clocks, I have the synthetic 859 that they recommend. And for platform balances and pocket watches, I have a 90, it's a Mobius. 9010/2 is what's written on it, but it's special. Like I use that on pocket watches or platform balances. So I've come to the conclusion that on the heavy powered pieces like the spring pivots, I use my heavier oil. I'll do that for the first couple gears in the train. So I have the standard oil thing, and I always put a helping of oil, a drop of oil on it before I put it together. That way I know my shoulders are oiled, everything is oiled. So this fits, and I'll slide the spring over the shaft. If you're careful when you put your C-clip on, you won't have a lot of extra spring hair that you have to fight with. Like you notice, I'm not fighting with any of that. So then the next thing I got to put on, again, I'm using my 80-40, the heavier oil. These clocks are much more forgiving as far as dirt than what a pocket watch or a platform balance is. Okay, so now I have both of my springs in place. So the next thing is the number 2 wheel. Again, I'll use my heavier. You can see the yellow. So I'll just slide that in place. And then the number 2 on my strike side. These take quite a load. That's why I like a little bit heavier oil on them. They take quite a load, those first couple wheels. So that's all I'll do for the heavy stuff. And then I'll go back to my regular, the 80-30. You notice I always keep the cover on my oil. You never want to leave oil open to the air any longer than have to, because it will oxidize, it will absorb moisture. Again, I'm putting a drop of oil on each pivot. Now on the minute arbor, I don't put a lot of oil. I just put a couple drops. Again, because it will dry out and harden. I put a couple drops on it and then I'll spin it, because there is a shoulder here that there's pressure. And the other place that needs to be oiled is the outside, because that's what wears against the so I'll put a drop, because that's what wears against the brass here. So we'll fit that down in. That should have been in first, because now I got to lift the wheel out, but you'll get used to doing stuff twice. And it's more difficult when you're talking, that you're not following. You're trying to think of other things, so your brain is trying to do two things. And I've got a little brain and it has trouble with one thing, so. Yeah. So I got it in and got it down where it belongs. So then the next thing is the 12-to-1 ratio gear, that it synchronizes the, because the minute wheel is the one that's being driven, and the hour one is driven by this intermediate gear. So it rotates at a 12-to-1 ratio. So now it's sitting in. So you can see all the wheels sitting in place. Now you notice I haven't put any of the levers in yet. I always try to fit them in after. So the next thing is the number 3 strike wheel. My oil must be getting down. I'm not getting anything on my dipstick. Okay, so now I'm getting into the critical area. You know, the one with the notch in it. Now I gotta put a lever in. After you do it a couple times, you'll find the easy way to. So it's sitting there, and the other one goes on top. And remember it. So I got to turn this wheel. And when I turn them, I always pivot it away, so I'm not turning any other wheels. You can see it sitting. If it's in the right place, it's fitting in the notch. And on the side, I'm not in the deep hole. So I'll just pull my trick where I turned it a little bit. So there, I'm in the deep hole. Check that. I'll check this wheel. Everything looks. So far, it looks good. So then the next thing is the be the 4th wheel. This is the arming wheel, and it's the one with the little pin. So I'll set it in, and it has to go under, and all these other things have to go over it. You see that? So I'm not going to put the fly in until after. So the next thing I want to put in is, now I got to put in the, and these I won't oil now, I oil them after because they move very little. So I'm setting that down in the hole. And then the next one, it has to slide up underneath where those two pins were and fit in the holes. Now we can hook the spring. Let's hook the spring over now, just so that it can aggravate me later. Okay, so everything is falling apart. So the other thing that we have to worry about too is the escapement, but I'm going to fit the escapement in after also. I need to get some of this stuff held in place. So now when I'm fitting, because I oil both sides of the pivots when I did it, so everything is now oiled. So I got to fit that under here, and then I also have to encourage this to come on top without falling out. So the first pivot I put in, so I've got one side done. I'm going to put the nut, and I've got the spring pivot in. So now I'll go do the other side, because sometimes you have to pull on that spring just a little bit to get it. Something moved on me. I feel pressure on the normally like I'm kneeling down and I can look in sideways on everything, but I'm spring pivots in. Now I'll go to the other side. So it's in. Again, I'll repeat again, do not use these nuts to apply pressure to force something in place. I'm just using them as a third hand. So now I have to get down, because I like to have them laying flat, and I get down horizontal so I can see in. The other thing to keep in mind is the safety pins on the plate sometimes will catch on the spring, so you have to make sure that they're out of the way. So I work from the spring side up. I've got enough done, I can catch a thread. I'll put a little bit of tension on it.
I don't believe you. All I see is a white piece of paper. Oh, there it is.
Well, yeah, it's hard to, so you can see the count. There's different ways you can get to hold the wheels.
There you go.
Stuff. So anyway, but that's all part of the process. No good to get frustrated over it.
No, no.
Because all that will do is create a compounded error.
Yep.
Right?
At that point, go ahead, yeah.
So now I got to fit the escapement in. I should be able to just lift this up a little bit, and the escapement pivots are always fairly small. Yeah. So I just lifted it up a little bit and fit it in.
Wendell, did you have to do any work on the pallets? Were they,
No, I just polished them a little bit and okay, you notice as soon as you lay it down, it wants to run because the weight is gone off of the pieces. I'm going to turn the and if we look down inside, you see the lobe and you see it pushing on that wire. That's the half-hour strike. And then the lobe goes around and catches the other piece. We'll let that go and I'll show you the arming. Okay, so if we look at the back of it, so what's going to happen? You watch right in here. So when I turn the hand, that the lobe, you see that arm going up? So the lobe is pushing on that other wire, which is pushing this wire, which is going to push that up. Because I had it on its side. Because I had it on its side. Yeah, but because I had it on the side, it didn't, because it relies on the weight of that arm, it took off, it didn't go into warning. So
okay.
I take the safety ratchets off the spring. So I tightened it up and they just slide out. Now this, so this stand, okay, so I got the suspension on. And one of the problems you'll see with this, you see how much play is in that crutch? We have to fix that to start. And the crutch has to be square, has to be at right angles. Be careful when you're prying on that because you don't want to pry on the pivots. The crutch has to be, the suspension has to be snug in that, but it has to be free. You see it's trying to run by itself there now, which is a good sign. I don't know why it doesn't want to focus. So I find the best way to adjust that is when I'm looking at it. Now you'll notice, now this one I had to re-rivet this back, the back suspension, this here one. So I roughly set it up. Now you can depth that a little bit because what we can see here is, you see how much drop we got, but you have to be careful that every tooth is the same. So it's a process of looking at every tooth. And then you look up underneath here, you get down and you can see how much lock you get. The lock is to how much tooth is hitting the side. And that looks like it's not bad, actually. Well, I got to find a way. Just hang on, I got to find a way. Hey, you notice it didn't run when I put the weight on it because now gravity is holding that straight up and down. So it's way out of beat. I'll click my yeah, because I can see, just looking at it, I can see up here that it's way out. So what I need to do is bend this crutch. I have this tool. It has a handle on it, and it has a notch, and it's really good for getting in there. And you can okay, on my beat tool, it's about 40% out. But what I didn't do, but before you get too far into that, you need to level. And I can't do it on the top, so I'll level it. I have a little level here that I use, so I'll get it level, because when it's in the case, it's going to be somewhat level. You also have to check it to beat when you put it back in the case. So you can hear that it's out of beat. So we're down to 20%. That's showing. Well, now this escape wheel I had to fix up, so it's got a few issues, so it's going to jump around a little bit. But you can hear the sound of the beat. It sounds fairly even. And if you want to play with it, this tool has a leveling leg that I can play instead of trying to bend that when I'm setting it up. Like, I'll put it in beat using the leveling leg just to make sure that everything is.
Wendell,
Yes.
could you just hold that tool up again somewhere near the camera, the one you were just using?
They come in different. I have 3 different sizes of this. So you have
And it's got a little T piece on the other end, has it?
it's got a groove in it, and it has a little handle so that you can reach in and bend things. And so there's 3 different thicknesses.
So what would they be called if you were looking for those on the Perrins website? What would they be called?
I don't really know. Some type of an adjustment tool. You might just go through tools and okay, so there something caught, so we may have a bad tooth. Or it could be set too deep and it doesn't have, because the deeper you set that depth, the harder it has to work to overcome that. But we don't have a lot of pendulum swing. I'm just trying to get in close. I'm going to just tap that in a little deeper. Those little arms. Oh, we're way out of beat. Because when you play with the depthing, you're also taking it at a beat. Yeah, that's in too deep now. It's catching on some teeth, so sometimes you can get in there with a screwdriver and pry it back up, or you can use a little punch and tap it back up. Because it's important to have those two straight. Like, I don't know if I can get in there to show you the lock. It's got pretty good lock. I don't have the spring wound up very tight either. Which could be a... Anyway, that's kind of the process, what you have to go through. We're soon at a time. Anybody got any questions before we...
Wendell, I'd like to ask, this is Miklos. It's about those helper springs, as you call them. I had 2 sessions movements, and then both of them had more than 2. Both of them had on the top part at least 2, or so, one of them even had 3. So altogether 5 or 4. So why would that be? That is it how they put them together originally, or somebody who had worked on it put extra ones?
I would say it goes back to this. This was just an old movement that I found. I have no idea what the history is of the movement. Somebody could have had it apart and done stuff to it, taken pieces out of it. We don't really know. That's why it goes back to, remember I said there'll be 2 classes of movements that you'll end up repairing. One that you know the history, which becomes much easier. And the second class is where you don't know. It's an auction type movement, and you don't know what somebody has done to it. So it could have the wrong pieces in it. So
yes, I understand that. So ideally, if you were to fortunately come across, and you've seen many of these, which is supposedly complete, how many of these should be in there?
Well, I would say that those 2 sets of levers in the top probably wouldn't hurt to have helper springs on them.
Right. So 4
now,
would be the minimum.
If we had time, I could go root through some other clocks and just see whether there's helper movements on them.
I see. So that would be logical to think that those 2 levers would have 1 each as well. So when I said 4, it would make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the other question is that, let's say if
the ones on the bottom, they're not helper springs, they're return springs. So that the strike works.
Yes.
Those aren't helper springs. The other one, because these levers, the one that goes into that deep notch doesn't have a lot of weight. So they put a little spring to make sure that it seats quick.
Yes. And then is that how you put those back on the top more so for the lever springs? Is that how many times this turned around, and what is the gauge, and all these things are extremely important, or you sort of just experiment?
Yeah, you'll have to just look at other clocks and see what, and see what it is for the gauge. All it is something to, instead of adding weight to the arm, they put a little bit of spring tension so that it falls in the hole quickly. I wouldn't think the gauge is really critical. If you put in too strong a spring, then the gear train has to provide enough power to that minute arbor lobe to lift it out of the hole. So if you got a real heavy spring, it's going to have a harder time lifting it out of the hole.
Yes. Yes.
Uh,
Thank you. And another question, you were talking about the oil and the heavier and the lighter, and of course one has to be careful not to leave it open. Does these oil or do these oils have expiry? So let's say you take care of them properly, always lock it and everything, or top, you know, but do they expire after a while when you should throw them out, or?
Yes, the books that I read and study says that after a year of having it opened and using it, it should be thrown away.
I see.
Because of, you know, because of oxidizing, and the little thing that you're sticking in has dirt in it. So, you know, there is some contamination.
Yes.
I don't know how many people do that. I don't throw it away after a year.
So if one is careful with them, it should be fine.
Yeah, I think people, when they write a book, they talk about the perfect world. You know, that, you know, everything perfect, that's what you do. But we tend to evolve into doing things that work for us.
Yes. And thank you, Wendell. And then if you don't mind me, just one more quick question. You made reference a number of times, and you're very experienced, how these session movements are tricky. And then I am very inexperienced, but I already know that they are, because I worked on 2 of them, and now they are both working, but maybe it's just by fluke at the end. But they are very, 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 I find them anyways difficult. So you mentioned that some of the others are a little more simpler, or maybe somewhat even easier. So if I'm fortunate to find one of those American clocks or whatever, which movements are more straightforward?
Well, Gilbert's are a little bit easier because and it's all got to do with the striking mechanism that makes it a little bit more challenging. And some days they kind of fall together, and then other days like sometimes I have a little clamp, and I don't know why I didn't do it today, that I'll clamp onto that gear so it won't move. So that way I know when I'm moving the arming gear with the pin that I'm moving it, because right now, today I was struggling because that other gear was moving a little bit, the one with the notch in it. So I was chasing my tail there a little bit. But normally I have a little clamp that I clamp onto it that holds it in place. And then I know exactly how much I'm moving the other gear.
And would you say that some of those movements, which are, let's say, the English ones, or not necessarily the tiny French ones, but the larger French one, are they easier, maybe a little bit simpler? Maybe?
Oh yeah, they're much easier because they don't have any internal striking mechanism. It's all on a count wheel on the back. Everything, and the same thing with the Hermele movements, which is what we're going to do next. All the striking mechanism is all on the outside of the clock, but in these American ones, the striking mechanism and all the levers and springs are in between the plates.
All right, that makes a lot of sense to
these are the more difficult ones to deal with. But the reason that I did it is because it's much more common than anything else.
Right.
These American movements are so common that's what, you know, 75% of the clocks you touch will be American clocks.
Yes.
And they all do things slightly different, but everything kind of works on that same principle where, you know, you have a cam on the minute arbor that moves a lever, that moves another lever, and they all have the arming pin, and, you know, and they have the big notch in the count wheel that the lever has to fall in. So those 3 things have to line up exactly for it to work.
Right. Thank you very much.
But if you understand one of them, the other ones become much easier because the principles are all there.
Yes. Thank you.
Sorry for the, you know, trying to get it together, but that's what clock repair is. You know, some days it takes a little bit, and you won't always have people sitting over your shoulder or people watching, or you're in a hurry. You know, the day you go to put a movement together, you should have not a lot of things on your mind, and it will go a lot better and smoother. But it's not something you rush. It becomes a process And I always work from the spring side and work up through and then gently push the longer pivots in place and kind of go up one side and then down the other. And the easiest thing to do is just get an old movement and take it apart and put it together a bunch of times. And, you know, when you come across a problem, think about what it is and what would be a solution, you know, like to hold the gears in place. You know, you can make up some kind of a clamp so that they don't move when you're trying to adjust them. Now, a lot of them, when you put them together, they'll fall in place and you won't have to do anything to adjust them to get them to work.